Okay, it's working. Oh yeah, look.
Are we done?
Yeah. But you're gonna have to sit in front of this. It's weird because it's, yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's got a little bit of a lag, tiny bit, but not much. If you notice what she's doing behind me.
No, it's like a 5-second
lag. Uh-huh.
So is that gonna be, so which one am I, which one
Change the video resolution. Okay. So how do I change that? Okay, so it's saying that I need to change the video resolution. So how do I do that? It says you need to change it. The current resolution is 1092 by 614, which is not supported. The expected video resolution is 1280 by 720. So do I change that in OBS or do I change that on YouTube? YouTube. Okay, and that's going to be under File, right? No? Yeah, that's what I mean. It's under File and OBS, right? Go to Settings. Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't see. Okay. That's the same thing I just clicked on. Settings. Okay. Snap sensitivity. Probably not general. Probably output. Okay. And it wants. It's not showing it now. It's not showing the thing anymore. So it is the output. But what do I need to change it to? Because now it's not showing my settings. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it won't let me change it, so.
Let's just roll it the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me move out of the way.
Not really. Hey everyone, thank you for bearing with us here. We are trying to work out some of the kinks of using new and fun technology during new and fun times. So there's a little bit of a delay if you hear it. I don't know if it's going to translate onto you to your end of things, but it definitely looks like it here. But anyway, welcome to Fall Gardening. I'm Lindsay with the North End Organic Nursery and Garden Minutes. Like I said, this is all brand new to us, and we're trying to kind of figure out how this all works. But so far, it looks like the presentation's on the screen, and I'm in the corner, and that's all I care about. So we are good to go for right now. We are going to be working through also trying to see your comments, and I have my YouTube open on my phone so I can actually see if you guys have any questions. We can take it from that way. So welcome to Fall Gardening in the Treasure Valley. I am Lindsay, like I said. We are here today to talk about something that seems kind of odd to talk about in the biggest heat wave that we've had of the entire summer, and that is planting cold season vegetables. This is the time of year when you actually want to either start seeding your cold season vegetables, or you want to start thinking about pulling out some things out of your garden space to plant things directly. Like, I'm not going to plant anything right now, just saying. It's too hot for man or beast out there. I'm going to wait until next week when things chill out just a bit more, and then I'm going to start popping in things like carrots and beets and root vegetables and whatnot. But right now, you can actually kind of do a reverse seed starting like we do in the springtime, but we're going to do it for fall season using our indoor cooler space. I'm going to get right into the presentation because I'm getting ahead of myself right now. Okay, looks like we've got a few people logged in. We're going to try to keep this recorded for later. Oops. So how do I advance the slide here? Click on this one, dragging it. How do you get the mouse back over here? Cool. There we go. Sweet, we're back. Okay, so here in Idaho, we have what we call a growing season, which I feel like is not terribly accurate because a growing season doesn't have to be just the dates where you can grow things like tomatoes and peppers and such. Our statistical frost-free dates are May 10th through October 6th. And those are the times when you can put out things that really do need those warmer temperatures in order to survive, like tomatoes, peppers, fruits, actually, if you want to categorize it as one general kind of area of plantings, you're looking at your fruits, not your vegetables. So your vegetables are what? A lot of people have the joking conversation about what is a tomato, a fruit, or a vegetable, right? So botanically speaking, a tomato is a fruit. The reason why it's a fruit, it has a seed inside of it. So that also puts pumpkin, zucchini, cucumbers, along with what we already associate as fruits with melons. They're all fruits, just some of them have higher sugar content. So when we're talking about fruiting vegetables, again, I'm using two different like oxymoron type of things here. Those are the things that like the heat. The things that do a lot better in cooler temperatures are going to be your real vegetables. Vegetable is a plant that you're going to be eating the vegetative part of the plant. So the leaf, stem, or root, that is a vegetable. When the vegetable goes into its fruiting stage, then all of a sudden we're harvesting the fruit. So we're going to be focusing on growing vegetables in our upcoming season here. So that hot season where we can grow our fruits is 147 days, but realistically, I'm going to say there's probably only 2 months out of the entire year where I'm not growing something. And on a mild winter, that might only be 1 month where we actually shut down or we're in between seasons. So let's talk about the things you can grow. Your cold hardy veggies are your leafy greens. So your lettuce, chard, kale, arugula, spinach, mustard, frisee, endive or endive if you're fancy, mache and broccolini, so you've got your leafy stuff. Your heading brassicas, so things that are going to be like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. Those are going to create a head. They take a little bit longer, so you always want to plan ahead on that. Legumes, so you've got your snow peas, snap peas, shell peas, fava beans. So legumes are one of those funny crops where beans in general don't like the cold. Fava beans do. Peas in general don't like the heat, but like asparagus peas do, if you really call that a pea. So you really just got to get to know your legumes to know which ones like which types of temperatures. Your root crops are definitely going to be some of your cold hardy stuff. You've got your carrots, beets, radishes, rutabaga, turnips, and parsnips. Allium crops, you can get another round of things like onions, shallots, leeks, and garlic. You may not get the big onions like you get in the summertime, but you can still grow onions and get a decent sized crop, if not just a green onion. Onions tend to be day length sensitive, and so they will not be quite as large if they don't have any sun in order to, spur them into that extra growth. You can also do your herbs again. Believe it or not, cilantro is much better as a fall crop than it is as a spring or summer crop. It does so much better and it bolts so much slower. So it's a great idea to get your cilantro in for a fall crop. Parsley as a perennial is fantastic, as is rosemary, sage, and oregano. Those are all your perennial cold hardy crops. They will grow and grow and grow until it gets really cold, if it gets really cold, and then they will kind of die back temporarily and then come back again the next year. Love perennial vegetables. So when do we do all of this stuff? So if we're looking at right now, you're looking at seeding indoors or in a shady area. So if you've been by the nursery lately, you'll see that we have a lot of seeding trays underneath the shade house, and they are there because, as you have noticed, I'm sure when you go outside, that when you step into the shade, it drops 10 to 20 degrees, right? Well, we need that extra drop in temperature in order to get some of the plants that we are trying to grow to function well and germinate well. We still have an issue with plants like spinach that even though they'll germinate now, it's so warm outside that they immediately want to go to seed. So I might wait another minute on even attempting to do spinach outside in a shady area. So if you have an area where that might get morning sun, but afternoon shade, that would be a decent spot to think about starting your crops. If you want to do them in a shady area underneath of a tree where you know you can get to it and tend to it, that's a good spot. If you want to do them indoors, just like you would your early spring crops with the tomatoes and other hot loving vegetables, you can put them in a little grow dome, and I have got a picture of that coming up here later. And you can grow it underneath the light using your air conditioning as a way to change the climatic environment for those plants. So once we get into mid-August through September, there's a lot of stuff that comes up quite quickly, and you can both transplant out the stuff that you've started indoors, but you can additionally just direct seed, things like leafy greens, cilantro, broccolini, root vegetables, fava beans, peas, cilantro, parsley. You can keep on putting them directly into the ground starting the middle of next month or tomorrow. So the middle of tomorrow's month. Anyway, the things that we started in July, okay, that first column, about mid-August to September, we're going to start looking at transplanting them into the garden once the temperatures drop out of like hell's inferno hot, right? We want to get them down hopefully to where our average highs aren't getting above 90, right? So your heading brassicas, your leafy greens, peas and herbs, things that you started early, you can then get outside. So what are some of the things you need to do in order to prep your beds and get them ready for our fall crops to start getting going? One of the first things you want to do is remove your spent plants and weeds. And when I say spent, I also put into that category underperforming plants. So plants that were doing quite well for a while, and zucchini often follows into this category. They tend to put on some beautiful fruit and then all of a sudden kind of look pitiful, and don't put on as nice and clean of vegetables or fruits as they did earlier in the season. But so anything else that's just taking up space and not performing, let's start cleaning them out so we can open up that space for our fall crops. One of the things that I theoretically like to do is plant my garlic, which I'll talk a little bit about garlic later in the presentation, but I'll plant my garlic in October, and then you usually harvest it about mid-June to mid-July, just depending on how warm of a spring we've had. And what's kind of a cool concept, and I've done this before, but I was just too anxious to fill up my beds this year. You pull out your garlic, let that area rest for a couple weeks, and let that be your fall garden. And then when you start to harvest and kill and your hot crops get winter killed, then you can plant your garlic in those spots again. So that's a way to kind of create that space. You only want to compost plants that were disease-free and weeds that haven't set seeds or don't have rhizomes. So a lot of us are seeing a big impact from morning glory or bindweed right now. Those never go into a compost pile. Those guys need to get wrapped in black plastic, taped over, hazmat, thrown into the garbage. They are something that we don't want to ever give another chance to live. You want to get some fresh compost that has been well composted, Mix that in. I also recommend adding in minerals such as azomite. Azomite stands for A to Z of minerals, and it's a fantastic supplement that really helps to replenish the nutrients and the minerals that are taken out of the soil once you harvest your summer crops or whatever else you're harvesting. I put azomite in my soil twice a year, right before I plant my fall crops and right before I plant my spring crops. Because it is a mineral and we are organic gardeners, nothing really happens overnight with that. They need the biological activity that's naturally happening in the soil in order to break down those minerals. So really, putting on azomite now is going to more benefit your spring crops than they will your fall crops. But if you wait till then you're going to be kind of chasing your tail. So we want to start it now so we can benefit next year's crops, and what you put down in the spring is going to benefit your fall crops. I also like doing an all-purpose fertilizer. So I have a picture of Dr. Earth Life up there. I want to be very, very specific that that's not the exact product that you have to get. Something that's a nice, well-balanced fertilizer like this Dr. Earth is great for fall crops because, and I'll get into NPK here in just a minute, we are going to be growing things where we're growing the leaf, the stem, and we want the nitrogen for the green, and we're doing the roots. So we want something that's going to kind of address and emphasize the whole plant. I do have one question, I think, over here. Let me see if I can get to it. Pinto beans, when do we harvest? Do we just leave them on the vine until they die? Yes, leave them on the vine until they die. If you want dry beans out of your pinto beans, you leave them on the stem, and as soon as they are dry enough to pick one off the plant and make it sound like a rattle, then you can shell them and keep them like you would dried pinto beans. So wait for the plant to die, or at least wait for the pods to die. Thanks for your question. Okay, understanding NPK. So we kind of already segued into this a little bit. This is really, really important to know your audience when it comes to your garden. Not every fertilizer is just something you want to throw at the garden and hope that it's going to address the plants that you're growing. So you have three main fertilizer elements that are in every box of anything that's called fertilizer. Well, it may not be in the box itself, but they have to tell you how much of it is in the box. So the three categories are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. NPK, right? Potassium, the chemical word on the periodic chart is a K, right? So NPK. So if you're looking at this box of all-purpose right here, I'm pointing to the box like it's a presentation and you guys can actually see me. But let's just talk through it. The 4 is the nitrogen, the 6 is the phosphorus, and the 2 is the potassium. So nitrogen is the green end protein. So this is responsible for making things green, chlorophyll synthesis. It's also responsible for protein synthesis. The only difference between a carbohydrate and a protein is nitrogen. A carbohydrate is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. A protein is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So you need nitrogen in order to have protein in your green chlorophyll leaves. Chlorophyll is a protein. So in order to have nice green plants and any kind of seed or protein content in the plant, nitrogen is necessary. However, nitrogen is a hog and it likes to block all the channels for every other nutrient to go up, or rather the plant looks at nitrogen as being something that's highly volatile, and anytime it shows up in the plant, in the ground, the plant wants to suck it up as much as possible because it may not be there tomorrow. So overdoing your nitrogen will cause all kinds of problem. I call it, when in a tomato plant, like an all hat, no cattle tomato, where you have a big green plant that's got lots of foliage but no tomatoes on it. So make sure that you use nitrogen appropriately, frequently, but not in excess. The next one's phosphorus, or P. That's roots, fruits, flowers, and sweetness. And so when we are dealing with fruiting plants, flowering plants, plants that we're going to try to build the sugar content in rooting plants, which of course every plant has a root, but we're not always trying to emphasize said root. So carrots, beets, tomatoes, peppers, beans, these are all things that do need phosphorus. Our soils typically aren't too terribly deficient in phosphorus, but having a little extra organic phosphorus in the soil is always helpful. Lastly, potassium is the regulator. The regulator means it assists with the general vigor of the plant. It helps the plant deal with heat, drought, and cold stress, along with general immunity, so that you can have a plant that will be more resilient when we have these hot temperatures if you have enough potassium, and also when we get the colder temperatures, it will be more resilient then also. A plant that is deficient in potassium tends to be more prone towards insects as well. Let's talk about where to plant. So in a fall garden, it's really important to think about the location of your garden. And the main reason for that is because while, the fall days are kind of nice and warm and mild, as it gets colder and colder and colder, do you really want to trek halfway across a yard that may or may not be wet or snowy? No, you probably don't. You probably want something that's going to be slightly closer to your back door, which, as you can see in this picture, I always love this picture because, I love it because it's an imperfect looking garden, and I hate perfect looking gardens because I can never accomplish it myself. This is an imperfect looking garden. There's the back door to somebody's house. I also love the fact that it has a nice reflective stucco wall that, in this case, just because I took the picture, is facing to the south. So this is a great place where you can get to it easily. It's south facing. The building itself is acting as a wind block, good accessibility. This one doesn't have raised beds. Raised beds are a really great idea though as well because of the fact that raised beds will warm up quicker. And if it gets too wet, they drain better. You don't want to deal with too much wet, heavy, logged soil in your fall gardens because we do get more moisture as we go into the colder months, and we also have cooler temperatures, which means less evaporation. So waterlogged soil is a definitely distinct possibility. You don't have to have it right outside the back door of a house like this. If you can find any other situation, that just gives it a little bit of protection. Obviously, stay away from the north side of anything because you're not going to get enough sunshine. South facing is really kind of critical. If you don't have an area that's south facing, make sure that it's at least west facing. Kind of opposite of what I tried to do with my summer garden because I don't want things to bake. You want things to get nice and warm, and if they are shaded from the afternoon sun, it might not get warm enough for them. Let's talk a little bit about season extension. So season extenders are tools that we use to raise soil temperature and or protect the plants from cold. Many of our cold hardy plants won't be killed by light frost, but may slow down in growth and can be killed by hard freezes. So season extenders basically are going to create a microclimate in your yard. The really cool thing about season extension is that once you use these tools, you can actually extend your season by 1 to 2 months on either end. So let's say you normally don't get out and start planting stuff until March. You can probably get out there and start planting stuff maybe February, and you can keep on growing things probably straight up until about the 1st of December. So it really does give you the option of growing things for a little bit longer. It's amazing what a difference 4 to 8 degrees can make, and I'll show you some of the options that you have. One of the most common ones and the things that I recommend the most often is floating row cover. It comes under a lot of different brand names, Agribon, Garden Blankets, DeWitt. There's lots of different people who make it. Any way you can get your hands on it, and we carry it at North End Organic Nursery. It is a fantastic tool, not only for your fall garden, it can help to protect your summer garden from those early frosts that we never see coming because it'll be nice, and all of a sudden there's a frost predicted, and then 2 weeks later it's back up into the 80s again. So you can extend your season from your summer garden going into the fall by using frost blankets there as well. But by covering up your garden either with the hoops, you can see in the picture on the right side, there's hoops to allow plants to kind of grow taller. And you can also see where the spinach is being covered up. You really don't need the hoops because it's a low growing plant, and just the fact that it's so densely planted, it kind of supports the floating row cover already. Another option is a low tunnel or a hoop house. These are super cool, kind of just one step up from floating row cover. The low tunnel hoop house is creating a miniature greenhouse at ground level. And this really does allow for you to extend your season quite a lot. What I don't like about them as much as the floating row cover is the fact that if you're using plastics, they don't breathe nearly as well. And if it's not breathing nearly as well, that means that you can have condensation and mold issues slightly more easily. So make sure that you're checking on them often enough to know whether that's happening or not. You can also use floating row cover with this kind of low tunnel hoop house sort of system, and you kind of get the best of both worlds. You can even do them in layers, but that's a great way to grow stuff multiple seasons. You could do a cold frame. We've got different types of cold frames in this screen, and they're just different varieties, either homemade types that you can do. The one in the middle, that's the straw bales. That's my hillbilly style of cold frame, because you just take straw bales that you might have been using for your fall decorations, stack them in a like horseshoe type pattern, and then you find some old windows or even some plastic, some clear like greenhouse plastic, and you can tuck it into that middle level that you see there with the straw bales, and then pull it out and make it go under. So that's a good way to kind of create a really quick, simple type of cold frame, and then be able to reuse the straw in the spring elsewhere. We can also do greenhouses and high tunnels. Of course, if you have the ability to get yourself a greenhouse or a high tunnel, that is so cool, and it gives you the opportunity to, in either a heated or unheated space, be able to extend your season on multiple levels. So in that middle picture where you see the gentleman holding like a salad basket, that's a geodesic dome greenhouse made by a company in Colorado called Growing Spaces, which I got a chance to see a bunch of them at one point. Really cool. It's the same dome greenhouse that's on the left there. Those guys actually don't need heat. They have a way of kind of producing their own heat through passive solar. It's really cool. The little hobby greenhouse on the right side there that you can see on that screen, that's something that's just a great little season extension tool, something that you can use to put out your cold season veggies for longer, or in the springtime, put your hot crops in there to kind of harden them off. Now, down at the bottom there, that is what you are getting the results from when you go shopping at the farmer's market and you see that farmer on the first week of June that has tomatoes. They have been growing them in a high tunnel greenhouse, which is an unheated space that basically just covers up the soil like a large garden and allows the grower to extend their season probably by 30 to 60 days. It's very cool. Let's talk a little bit about types of crops that you can grow that will give you a cut and come again type of harvest. So some crops, when you plant them, like heading brassicas, once you pick them, they're done and you don't get to harvest them again. So if you're somebody who would like to go and graze your garden on a regular basis, you might want to select some cut and come again type varieties. So you want to look for leaf lettuces instead of heading lettuces. So something that is like a romaine is not considered to be a heading lettuce, nor is a like iceberg or a butter type lettuce. You can steal a few leaves on the outside of those, but overall, you're usually going to cut those whole. Now, the leaf lettuces that you can get, the frillier types, those ones you can keep on picking the outside leaves and go from there. Cilantro, great cut and come again. You can almost cut it all the way down to the ground and it'll probably come back with a little bit more. Arugula, pick the outside leaves. Spinach, pick the outside leaves. Chard, same thing. Kale, same thing. And also parsley. Yes, we have a question.
With succession planting of bush beans, can you plant the next planting of beans in the same bed, or you just remove the old plants from it?
Yes, absolutely. So I don't think that there's any reason why you have to do crop rotation unless you've had a problem. There's a couple of different schools of thought when it comes to crop rotation, that if you plant the same plant over and over again in the same spot, you're going to cultivate the same problems and diseases. There's also the school of thought that says when you plant a plant in an area, it puts a lot of work into developing its biological community underground. And so there are certain bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, and organisms that have colonized in that soil around the root zone of that plant. So sometimes by uprooting that plant and putting in something that's a complete foreigner into that neighborhood isn't always conducive. There are really good crop rotational plants that you can get that are companion planting based. But if you want to put in a second crop of beans and the first crop did great, go ahead and do it. Now, do you want to rotate out after maybe 4 or 5 crops? Probably, because you're going to be using the same nutrients generation after generation after generation, and you can try to replenish them, but it may not always be a good idea. So, good question. Don't feel like you have to crop rotate. Just do it eventually, just so that different plants can take different nutrients out of the soil. Hope I answered the question all right. Thanks for keeping an eye on that, guys. I can see it over there on the phone, but it's just sort of small. Hello. So where to start seeds? We kind of already talked about this just a little bit. When you're starting seeds this time of year, the plants that we're wanting to grow really prefer cooler temperatures. So I'm actually going to kind of segue a little bit here into why fall gardening is my favorite gardening. In the springtime, we're planting seeds in this vegetable cold hardy category that we then transplant outside, or we direct seed them outside, and they love those early spring temperatures. Then all of a sudden we jettison into summertime, and the summer heat just nukes them, and all of a sudden that broccoli that we've been watching and hoping to get that big beautiful head of broccoli just turns into flowers, and it's all done. That's because we're going from cold to hot. In a fall garden, we go from hot to cold. So we're going to transplant stuff out when it's still quite warm, which will actually give them a really good head start because they'll like the warmth for that early vegetative state. And then it'll put the brakes on them towards that end part when we want to harvest them. So that broccoli is more likely to head out. That spinach is going to be a lot sweeter. That arugula is going to be far less peppery because it is going to be condensing sugars in the evening hours as we are getting those light frosts rolling into September and October. So that's one of the reasons why we want to do a fall garden. But starting seeds in the middle of July is what exactly we're experiencing right now. It is just crazy hot outside, and most of these seeds won't germinate if you put them in the ground today. So you probably need to start them someplace out of the harsh weather. So I like to use either underneath a shade house. You can see in the picture on the right, that's the shade house at the nursery. We put them in a place and actually hung more shade cloth along the backside to protect them. That does really well for us. If you don't have a shade house or a good spot that we had talked about earlier, you can use what's a product on the left that we really like. It's a Sunblaster Nanodome greenhouse. And what it is just a tray, a lid, and a light that allow you to keep your plants indoors in your air-conditioned, climate-controlled area and let them germinate in the conditions that they like. And then when it cools off a bit, take them outside and transplant them. There's a lot of advantages to seed starting indoors anyway, just because you get to control the germination, you can make sure the water is right, the soil's right, and then transplant things out and space them exactly how you want them. So if you're not ready to plant directly outdoors, that's fine. It's still a good time to be seed starting indoors. Is there another one?
Yeah. For bush beans, I was discouraged by the yield I had this summer. And then it's 3 Oregon sugar pods per plant before the plant started to die. Is that common, or I better left in the fall garden?
I'm just going to reread that just because my voice is a lot closer to the microphone here. For bush beans, I was discouraged by the yield I had this summer. I managed 3 Oregon sugar pods per plant before they started to die. Is that common? Will I have better luck in a fall garden? So just to clarify, I just want to make sure you're talking about bush beans because Oregon sugar pods are peas. So if you planted peas late in the season, that doesn't surprise me. They don't like the heat. But if you were planting bush beans, there might be another variety. So if you don't mind, I'll keep this close to me. And if you can clarify which you're talking about. If you are talking about peas, yes, peas will do great going into the fall. We're going to want to plant them sooner than later. I wouldn't actually wait too much longer. Let's wait till the hundreds go away and then plant them again for peas. So they are the peas. Okay, cool, great. So if you planted peas, the yield this summer is expectantly low. You have to get peas in the ground when the soil is cool, and most people finish harvesting their peas before usually like the 4th of July. That's usually towards the end of pea season. So if you didn't get them in soon enough, it doesn't surprise me that they didn't do very well going into the summer months. So definitely get them into the ground again as soon as we get out of the hundreds, and you'll be able to harvest them in September. Hope that answers your question. I'm trying to see, is there anything else on here? Nope, right now we're good. Okay, moving on. So a lot of plants will grow in the cold but not germinate well in the heat. Check that off. They need light immediately after germination. So just don't, if you don't have a light and you don't want to buy a lighting system, make sure that as soon as they pop up out of the ground, you give them at least 6 to 8 hours of light per day. If you're doing an artificial light, let's call that 12 to 16 hours a day. And I'm talking about a grow light specifically. So if you're starting outside, make sure you provide that extra protection from the afternoon sun and excessive heat. If you're starting indoors, make sure you provide that sufficient lighting by bright windows or supplemental lighting. Okay, going into cover cropping, we just got a few more slides here to go. Cover cropping is the practice of planting a blend of legumes, so like beans and peas, broadleafs, things like turnips and radishes are examples of broadleaf cover crops, and grains like rye, oats, wheat, to help build the soil organic matter, fertility, and protect the soil from winter damage and erosion. The plants in a cover crop situation aren't going to be harvested, but rather mowed down or turned into the soil to retain those nutrients that have been cultivated. And I'll explain how that happens. Great thing with cover cropping is that it reduces weeds, and it also reduces the needs for fertilizer and compost. But kind of like I already mentioned in that first bullet point, they also keep your soil from eroding and sort of washing away. So if you aren't going to do a fall garden in all of your beds, fall is also an amazing time to improve your soil for springtime. You really want to get those cover crops in probably in the months of August and September at the latest, because you want them to have enough time to put on some serious growth before some of them may get winter killed. Some of them won't. A lot of them are frost tolerant, but not hard freeze tolerant. This last winter was so mild that it's really not that big of a deal, but you want to get them in sooner than later. So when you're planting grains, they do a really good job helping to build the organic matter in the soil. So you're actually depositing carbon into the soil when you're doing grains. Legumes have the natural ability, because they have these rhizobacteria around their root zone, that they can take atmospheric nitrogen, suck it down into the ground, and make it plant available nitrogen as they decompose into the ground. This is why beans and peas generally don't need nitrogen fertilizer, and why farmers like to rotate peas and corn, because corn eats up a ton of nitrogen, and peas, as they decompose, leave behind a ton of nitrogen. So when you're planting peas and then mulling them into the ground or whatever, tilling them into the ground, turning them under, they will leave that nitrogen in the soil so that the next crop will be able to enjoy it, reducing your need for more compost and more nitrogen fertilizer next year. The third category of broadleafs are a fantastic way to break disease cycles. They are also a really good way to do some massive root tilling. So if you plant turnips or radishes into the ground, especially if you do like a daikon radish, if you've ever seen the daikon radish, they're long white radishes, and they are like drills. And as you plant them, even in hard compacted soil, they will punch their way down. And as they're punching their way down, they're sending out little fine root hairs, and they're mobilizing nutrients on all those different levels that maybe some of your other plants weren't able to get to because the soil was too compacted. And then they will actually hypermobilize those nutrients up through the root shaft and redeposit some of those nutrients at a higher level as it decomposes. So don't forget about using some of these powerful drillers in your soil along with your legumes and your grains for building nitrogen and carbon to actually just improve the quality of your soil. They have the ability to break disease cycles too. So if you've had any disease issues or nematode issues or bug issues, they tend to do a really good job with breaking up some of those problems that you might have. They're kind of like a biofumigant. As you can see in the picture, we do make our own Idaho Soil Builder Fall Cover Crop Mix, and we should have that available in the nursery within the next couple of weeks. One of those little bags costs $5, and it covers about 500 square feet in your garden beds, and it's a great time to put it down in August. Lastly, We're going to talk about growing great garlic, but not a whole lot. We are going to do a completely separate garlic class. And that separate garlic class will be probably first time sometime early September. But just to let you know that garlic is a fall planting crop as well. The best time to get your garlic in the ground is generally about Halloween. I always jokingly say, and I'm such a dork, but think about Halloween, think about vampires, think about trying to vampire proof your garden and plant your garlic. We grow great garlic here. We have good soil for it. We can actually grow both the hardneck and the softneck varieties. So the softneck varieties tend to be ones that are grown in more moderate climates like the Mediterranean, Southern Europe. That's where they originate from, and that's where a lot of their names sound like too. You have Enchelium Red, you have Early Italian, you have California White. They all sound like warm places, right? Versus your hardneck garlics are your cold tolerant garlics, and they come from places like Korea and Siberia, and they're named things like Russian and German, and they obviously come from cold places. So here in Idaho, we have a really nice balance of the ability to grow the softnecks and the hardnecks. So you get to grow whatever you want. You must purchase certified seed stock the first year you grow garlic, and that is because there's a very strict mandate in Idaho to quarantine out. Gosh, the word quarantine in any other context right now just sounds horrid, right? They have to quarantine a specific fungal disease called white rot. And white rot is something that will follow tissue culture of allium plants, which is also why it's really hard to find really good allium bulbs for flowers in the state, because they aren't certified. So we're trying to keep out that horrible fungal disease, because once it's in your garden beds, it's fairly difficult to get rid of for like 10 years. And we have a lot of agriculture in the state that is based around allium crops like onions specifically. So in Idaho, we grow some of the best garlic in the world too, and everybody wants it because we don't have white rot here anymore. We used to, and especially in southwestern Idaho, it is a quarantine area, so they don't want us to bring in any white rot from elsewhere. So in the first year that you grow garlic, you need to go to your local nursery. We will definitely be carrying it. I think we've got about 9 different varieties that we're bringing in this year. And buy certified seed garlic that has been tested for white rot. Once you've bought your certified seed in the first year, you save the best of those garlics, and then you replant them the next year in your own garden beds. It is technically illegal to then share it, because if for some chance you were cooking with some California garlics one night and it had white rot on it, and then you went outside and you pulled some weeds and you introduced it into your garden, who knows what's happening? At least if you replant it in your own garden, you're not risking spreading it around. So you can replant your own garlic though. So keep the best of the best, and you can eat the ones that didn't quite make the grade for seed quality. Each clove that you plant will make a whole bulb. So you break up the bulb, plant each little clove out. Like I said, I'm going to go into much more detail with our next class for garlic alone. You're planting at the end of October. You're generally harvesting about 4th of July. I probably harvested mine about the 20th of June this year, but that was because our spring was so mild that it really enabled us to do that. So your hardnecks versus your softnecks. I kind of talked about that as far as their regions go, but the hardnecks have a literal hard stem that goes up the center of the bulb, and it has larger, stiffer bulbs around that center hardneck that are much easier to peel, but they don't keep as long. Those easy to peel sheaths around the hardneck cloves make it so that they pop off really easily, but it also allows moisture in there more easily. The softnecks, contrarily, they have all of the tops of the cloves kind of coming together into a soft stem that is quite pliable. And each one of those cloves is almost like food saver wrapped in their little clove sheath. And it makes them very, very good for long-term storage. So that's also the type of garlic that we braid. And if you saw my braiding video that I just did a few weeks ago, you have to have softneck garlic if you wanted braided garlic. So I always plant both. One, so I can have the large, easy to peel garlic right in the early part of the season for eating. And then I have my long-term storage garlic, my pretty braided garlic that I can eat throughout the winter until my next crop is harvestable. You want to plant root end down in well-composted soil. Different depths people like to talk about with that. You have a depth that I usually do is like 2 to 3 inches, but I know somebody who's a very good gardener around here, and she swears by 6 inches. So you might want to go as deep as 6 inches. It's not a big deal, but nice thing about going a little bit deeper is that if we have a weird winter that has a lot of freeze and thaw happening, you won't heave your garlic cloves out of the ground if they're buried deep. You can mulch lightly with leaves or straw at planting, and before the first hard freeze, it's a really good idea to mulch more heavily with either straw or leaves or whatever, again, to insulate the soil, not so much to keep the cold out, but to keep the cold in so you don't have those different heaves. I think there's another question here. Okay. Can you save garlic in the refrigerator until planting time? I'm afraid it will get too dry. I got my garlic from you guys. Okay, so did you buy the garlic and grow it and then harvest it, and now you're looking to harvest or plant it again? I'm going to see what you say about that, but while you're saying that, no, don't put it in the fridge. The fridge will actually inspire it to grow again. Because garlic is triggered by cooler temperatures, it will start to sprout if you put it into the refrigerator. So please keep it someplace where it's a nice moderate temperature, not too, okay, Barbara, you said yes, that is, so you harvested it yourself from garlic that you planted and grew. Just keep it someplace with good air circulation between now and Halloween, and then you'll get to plant it in. So hang it up somewhere that isn't going to get too hot or too cold for that matter also. Someplace with really good air circulation is ideal. If you can hang it from a rafter in a garage, in your kitchen, in like a mesh bag, those are really good options as well, but not the refrigerator. Okay, if anybody has any last questions about fall gardening, this is my last slide. I can take more questions. I will also come back and visit this video if you are not watching live with us and you're watching it at a later time, and you can post your questions below and I will come back and just type answer the question or the answers in as to the best of my ability at least. So, oh, got another one here. What do I do with green tomatoes that are not ripening on the plant? So, this is kind of that time of year. A lot of plants, and it depends on the species, will start really heavy setting a lot of green tomatoes on the plant. So it's kind of normal, and I really wouldn't worry about it at all right now as far as having too many green tomatoes. However, if you start having so many green tomatoes and it's just not going anywhere, stress the plant out a little bit. And that means go back and check the video that I just posted a few weeks back on mid-season tomato care. Make sure that you've pruned out all of your excess branches. And as we start getting into the middle of August, start cutting back your water, even if your plants are looking a little bit stressed. By stressing the plants out a bit, it is going to make them want to ripen faster. Once we get to about the 1st of September, I will cut out 50% of all the foliage that isn't directly supporting the green fruit on my plant because I want them to turn whatever color they're supposed to turn at the very minimum before the frost. So hopefully that answers your question. Let them just keep putting on green fruit for now. They will start turning, different varieties start turning faster than others. Were you going to talk about potatoes for the fall? As far as what? We don't really plant potatoes in the fall. We plant potatoes in the spring or early summer. Are you talking about harvesting and storing potatoes, or are you talking about planting potatoes again, Brittany? Because if you're thinking about harvesting potatoes, I'm actually going to probably be doing a video next week about curing potatoes and stuff like that. But we're definitely not planting any more potatoes in the fall. Planting for the fall. So like planting potato. I think we're kind of past that window of planting potatoes. You could plant potatoes as early as mid-March and for a summer harvest, or as late as probably 4th of July for an early fall harvest. But I don't think I'd be trying to plant potatoes again right now and expect them to make much of a crop before the frost. Gotcha. If it's possible here. No, it's not possible here. You can do 2 to 3 crops of potatoes for sure, but at this particular point in the season, we are kind of past the potato planting time. Oh, does it help to soak bean and pea seeds before planting? It does. That's a great question. Um, think about the size of the seed. It is a giant seed for beans and peas in general. And so when you put them in the ground, you have to make sure that enough water stays near that seed in order to soak all the way through to stimulate that germination process. And by pre-soaking your seeds, you're actually making sure that they absorb all the water that they need and maybe even start to send up a little itty bitty sprout, and then you can plop them into the ground. Don't let them sprout too far indoors. I would just let them get to that super swollen stage, like maybe 24 hours, and then plant them out so that you don't risk having little baby sprouts coming out looking for sunshine, and then you're scrambling to get them in the ground or they start growing into each other. So yeah, it does help to soak your beans and peas if you want to do that. Now, do I do that every time? No, because a lot of times I'll be like, oh, hey, I've got a free half an hour this evening. I'm going to plant something, and I'll open up my peas and I'll just stick them in the ground, and they still make. But it'll buy you a couple of extra days ahead by not having to wait for them to be watered and sprouting up like they would naturally. Okay, any other questions before we log out for today, folks? If you have any more questions, you can also come down and visit us at North End Organic Nursery, and make sure that if you have specific questions about your plants, anything that you have issues with, bring a picture, bring a sample, bring multiple pictures. We call it plant CSI. So if there's something you want us to diagnose, we got to have as much information as possible, as many angles of the problem as possible. And we will be probably posting another few videos coming up here in the upcoming month. So thanks for tuning in with us. And what's that again? Oh, yes, my daughter, who is the YouTube queen as far as her love of watching YouTube, reminded me, please like our channel, subscribe to our channel, and what do they say on your videos? Smash the... Okay, smash that like button, subscribe, and click on notifications so when we do have another video coming up, it will actually give you a heads up when it's about to start. All right, thank you all for joining us. This has been Lindsay at North End Organic Nursery and Garden Minutes, and we will see you soon. Oh, forgot to say one last thing. We do have tons of vegetable starts that we have started back in early June, and all the fall seeds that you might need, all the fertilizers, all that stuff is in stock right now. If you want to start prepping your space in order to grow your fall garden, please come down and see us at the address that's on the screen. All right, everybody, have a good one. Bye.